I want to talk about energy security and policy, but if I could get a moment, if you have a comment or reaction to President Biden's comments in Tokyo about Taiwan. I'm going to guess those comments will be watered down or walked back by the White House, but those are pretty explicit yeses by President Biden. What is your take on that?
In fact, I think the White House has already walked back, says it makes no change in our policy of strategic ambiguity, but clearly that's not the way it'll be read in Beijing. And it is all part of this kind of movement towards this great power competition and this sort of rising split between China and the United States, which is the defining geopolitical issue for many years to come.
Yeah, it truly is, and we'll see what happens there. Futures, they are higher. Oil is higher as well. And, you know, Dan, I think the one thing that you have done in your career and that I have learned from you so much, and you write about it in your books, is that, you know, people sometimes think of energy as a part of the global economy. In many ways, energy is the economy, is it not? I mean, literally the economy is just taking energy to make things that we can buy, sell, and produce. How frontline is energy security being talked about in Davos right now?
You know, you're so right, Brian. It is energy is the foundation, and it's embodied in everything else. If you look at the price of food, if you figure energy costs in one way or the other are 70% of the total cost of food. Well, I think energy security may not have been planned a couple of months ago to be on the agenda, but it's front and center on the agenda. I just came from a meeting with the German Vice Chancellor, Robert Habeck, who was talking, you know, he said that Germany had made a strategic mistake being as dependent as it has been on Russian oil, gas, and coal. And he said, we're going to change that in a matter of weeks. But on the other hand, there's a recognition that that's a very big job to do. And the repercussions, we had the energy minister, petroleum minister from India talking about, he says it's intolerable what's happening with prices and what it means in terms of inflation. So these issues have really come crashing in on the discussion at Davos.
With all due respect to Habeck of Germany, how do you change 30 years of energy policy and reliance on imported Russian energy in a matter of weeks or months, Dan?
Well, I think the way Vladimir Putin has done it by invading, of course, Ukraine and the reaction to it, I think he never expected that Europe would respond the way. He assumed that given their high dependence on Russian energy, they would say this is terrible and wave it on and get on with life. I think you can see it happening in crude oil pretty quickly. That's the one where you have the most flexibility, at least for now, because there's enough oil in the world, although as China comes out of COVID lockdowns, demand will go up and put pressure on it. It gets more complicated when you're looking at product, i.e. diesel or jet fuel, and it's really complicated when you look at natural gas because you simply don't have the same flexibility because you're depending so much on pipelines instead of oil that can be moved around on tankers. So natural gas, when I talk to people here, the biggest issue they come back to again and again is natural gas. Where can we find some gas to replace what flows through Nord Stream 2? And that's the one that's causing the most concern, not only for governments, but also, of course, for industry and for consumers.
And what are they saying about that, Dan? Obviously, renewables are a huge part of that strategy, and renewables can be extremely effective in many ways. But the one thing renewables are not good at is storage. That's the biggest knock on renewables right now. We're getting there. There are battery technologies that are coming out, but even the biggest, best batteries for renewables will store that power for about 8 to 12 hours, not days, weeks, months, or even years. Where do we stand right now?
Exactly. Natural gas you can have in storage in the autumn and use it all through the winter. So, I mean, they're saying we're going to accelerate renewables, but even in this discussion today, they said it's 2 or 3 years. And there's a couple of other obstacles. One is permitting. One of the companies says it can take 7 years to license, to permit a new onshore wind turbine in Europe. And the other thing is the supply chain. The supply chains for renewables are just as difficult as they are for others. And so that's a hindrance. But no question Europe is going to, if I may say this, step on the gas in terms of renewables and try and speed it up More offshore wind, for instance, is very much on the agenda, but there are supply chain issues and there are lead times.
I want to be optimistic on a Monday morning, Dan, but I also want to be realistic as well. If for some reason, whether it's Putin's choice or some sort of act of, against a pipeline, the Yamal pipeline or one of the other ones, the Friendship pipeline, if they were to have a problem per se, if Russian gas were to tomorrow be cut off to continental Europe entirely, what would happen? What would that look like?
Well, Brian, you're asking the right question, which is not let's debate what you can or can't do. You have to assume exactly what you have said, that it actually does happen. Maybe Putin will do something, a tactical nuclear weapon or something, or just cut it off. I mean, he's doing it to individual countries. What do you do then? Well, what you want to do is you want to plan in advance and say, yes, we can bring some more gas on actually from Netherlands. We can bring 10% more gas on from Norway. U.S. LNG has become a part of the security, your energy security of Europe. So all of those things, but it will take real cooperation. And I think you're pointing, you've got to plan for that worst case happening, because it could happen, tomorrow, it could happen next week in the situation that we're in. And so I think some of this going back and forth as debating this or that, I think they need to be planning for the case that you're talking about.